Well, I'm going to start today. We finished off the St. Clair's story about her growing up as a young girl and teenager, and then she got married to Harold, and that was a disaster for her. She lost her identity, actually, of who she really was. Her mother knew it, and she tried to rescue her. That's her daughter. Any mother would do that. But today we're going to be reading about Waverly Jong. I'd like to start focusing on the characters of what we're reading about, how the mothers came to the United States. It wasn't easy for them. And then they settled in San Francisco and they became friends. These four ladies became friends and they started the Joy Luck Club. They would play mahjong. They gambled. The one who won would always save that money to have a feast at the end of the year. But they started thinking, these four ladies started thinking, we're wasting this. We need to invest it. That's when they got their husbands involved. So the husbands would come also on this night. The woman would disappear into the kitchen area and started playing their mahjong. Whoever won, they would collect the money and they would give it to the husbands, who were great investors. So the women were smart. The women didn't brag. They didn't boast. They just gave it to their husbands because that was going to be the future money for their families. There's four families. Now we're going to read about Waverly's Young, what she went through and how she sees. Now she's a Chinese American. Her mother is Chinese. This title of this chapter is called Four Directions. I had taken my mother out to lunch at my favorite Chinese restaurant in hopes of putting her in a good mood, but it was a disaster. When we met on the Four Directions restaurant, she eyed me with immediate disapproval. "Oh, yeah? What's that matter with your hair?" she said in Chinese. "What do you mean? What's the matter?" I says. "I had a cut. Mr. Rory had styled my hair differently this time, and systematically he blunt cut the lines and the fringes, and he made it shorter on the left side, and it was fashionable, yet not ridiculously so, Mom." "Looks chopped off," she said. "You must ask for your money back." I sighed. "Let's just have nice lunch together, okay?" She wore her tight lips pinched down as she scanned through the menu, muttering, That's how her mother was. "Not too many good things, this menu." Then she tapped the waiter's arm, wiped the length of her chopsticks with her lips, and sniffed. "This greasy thing, do you expect me to eat it with it? She makes a show of washing out her rice bowl with hot tea, and then warned other restaurant patrons seated near her and near us the same thing. She told the waiter to make sure the soup was very hot, and of course it was, by her tongue's expert estimate, not even lukewarm. "You shouldn't get so upset," I said to my mother after she disrupted a charge of $2 extra because she had specified chrysanthemum tea instead of the regular green tea. "Besides, unnecessary stress isn't good for your heart." "Nothing is wrong with my heart," she huffed, as she kept a disappearing eye on the waiter. And she was right. Despite all the tensions she places on herself and others, the doctors have proclaimed that my mother at age 69 was the blood pressure of a 16-year-old and the strength of a horse. And that's what she is. She's a horse. She was born in 1918, destined to be obstinate and frank to the point in tactfulness. She and I made a bad combination because, you see, I'm a rabbit. I was born in 1951, supposedly sensitive, with tendencies toward being thin-skinned, skittery at the first sight of circumstances. After our miserable lunch, I gave up the idea that there would ever be a good time to tell her the news that Rich Shields and I were getting married. Another American man? Oh. Why are you so nervous? My friend Marilyn Fiber had asked over the phone on the other night. It's not if Rich is the scum of the earth. He's a tax attorney, like you. For Christ's sake, how can she criticize that? Why are you so nervous, my friend had asked over the phone. Oh my gosh, here we go. You know my mother, I said. She never thinks anybody is good enough for anything. So elope with the guy. That's what I did with Marvin. Marvin was my first husband, my high school sweetheart. So there you go. So when my mother found out, she threw her shoe at us. I said, and that was just for openers. My mother had never met Rich, in fact. Every time I brought up his name when I said, for instance, that Rich and I had gone to the symphony, that Rich had taken my 4-year-old daughter, Soshiana, to the zoo, my mother found a way to change the subject. Did I tell you, I said as we waited for the lunch bill at the Four Directions, what a great time Soshiana had with Rich at the Explorium. Interrupted my mother. I didn't tell you. Your father's doctors say maybe he need exploratory surgery. But no. Now they say everything's normal. Just too much constipation. I gave up, and then we did the usual routine. I paid for the bill with the 10 and the 3 ones. My mother pulled back the dollar bills and counted out exact change, 13 cents, and put that on the tray instead, explaining firmly, no tip. She tossed her head back with a triumphant smile while my mother used the restroom. I slipped the waiter a $5 bill. He nodded to me with deep understanding. While she was gone, I devised another plan. Così stinks to death in there, muttered my mother when she returned. The bathroom stinked. She nudged me with a little travel package of Kleenex. She did not trust other people's toilet paper. Do you need to use? I shook my head. But before I drop you off, let's stop at my place real quick. There's something I want to show you. My mother had not been to my apartment in months. When I was first married, she used to drop unannounced until one day I suggested she call ahead of time. Ever since then, she has refused to come unless I issue an official invitation. And so I watched her, seeing her reaction to the changes in my apartment. From the Primstein habitat I maintained after the divorce, when all of a sudden I had too much time to keep my life in order, to this present chaos, a home full of life and love. The hallway floor was littered with shoshan, toys, all bright plastic things with scattered parts. There was a set of Rich's barbells in the living room, 2 dirty snifters on the coffee table, and the disemboweled remains of the phone that Shoshan and Rich took apart the other day. Lost my place, sorry. Took apart, where was I at? The other day to see where the voices came from. It's back here, I said. We kept walking all the way to the back bedroom. The bed was unmade, dresser drawers were hanging out with socks and ties spilling over. My mother stepped over running shoes. More Shushan toys, Rich. Black loafers, my scarves, a stack of white shirts just back from the cleaners. Her look was one of the painful denials reminding me of a long time ago when she took my brother and me down to the clinic to get our polio booster shots. As a needle went into my brother's arm, he screamed. My mother looked at me with agony written all over her face and assured me, "Next one doesn't hurt." But now, how could my mother not notice that we were living together? That this was serious and would not go away, even if I didn't talk about it. She had to say something. I went to the closet and then came back with the mink jacket that Rich had given me for Christmas. It was the most extravagant gift I have ever received. I put the jacket on. "It's sort of silly present," I said. "Normally, it's hardly ever cold enough in San Francisco to wear a mink, but it seems to be a fad. What people are buying these days, wives and girlfriends." My mother was quiet. She was looking toward my open closet, bulging with racks of shoes, ties, my dresser, and rich suits. She ran her finger over the mink. "This not good," she said at last. "It's just leftover strips, and that fur is too short, no long hair." "How can you criticize a gift?" I protested. I was deeply wounded. He gave me this from his heart. And looking at the cost of the mirror, I couldn't feel or fend off the strength of her will anymore. Her ability to make me see black where there was once white, white where there was once black. The coat looked shabby as an imitation romance. "Aren't you going to say something else?" I asked softly. "What should I say?" "About the apartment, about this." I gestured to all the signs of rich lying around. She looked around the room, towards the hall, and finally she said, "You have a career. You are busy. You want to live like a mess? What do I say?" My mother knows how to hit nerves, and the plan I felt was worse than the other kind of misery, because what she does always comes as a shock, exactly like an electric jolt that grounds itself permanently in my memory. I still remember that first day, how it felt. I was 10 then. Even though I was young, I knew my ability to play chess was a gift. It was effortless, so easy. Could see things on the checkboard that other people could not. I could create barriers to protect myself that were invisible to my opponents. And this gift gave me supreme confidence. I knew what my opponents would do, the move, before they even moved it. I knew exactly what point their faces would fall when my seemingly simple childlike strategy would reveal itself as a devastating and irreversible course. I loved to win. We all know that one, Waverly. And my mother loved to show me off like one of my many trophies she polished. She used to discuss my games as if she had devised the strategies herself. I told my daughter, "Use your horse to run over the enemy." She informed one shoekeeper, "She won't very quickly this way. She won very quickly this way." Wrong. Sorry, guys. It's chess. And of course, she had said this before, game that 100 other useless things that had nothing to do with my winnings. To our family friends who visit us, she could confide, "You don't have to be so smart to win chess. It's just tricks. You blow from the north, the south, east, and the west. The other person becomes confused. They don't know which way to run." I hate the way she tried to take all the credit and come And one day I told her, shouting at her at the Stockton Street in the middle of the crowd of people, I told her she didn't know anything. She didn't, and she shouldn't show off. She should shut up. Words to that effect is what I used. That evening and the next day, she wouldn't speak to me. She would say stiff words to my father and brother as if I had become invisible. And she was talking about rotten fish she had thrown away, but which she had left behind its bad smell. That was her she was talking about. I knew this strategy, this sneaky way to get someone to pounce back in anger and fall into a trap, so I ignored her. I refused to speak and waited for her to come to me. After many days had gone by in silence, I sat in my room, staring at 64 squares of chessboard, trying to think of another way, and that's when I decided to quit playing chess. Of course, I didn't mean to quit forever, at most just for a few days, and I made a show of it. Instead of practicing in my room every night, as I laid always, I marched into the living room and sat down on the front of the TV set with my brothers, who stared at me. An unwelcome intruder. I used my brother to further my plan. I cracked my knuckles to annoy them. Ma, they shouted, make her stop. Make her go away. But my mother did not say anything. Still, I was not worried. But I could see I would have to make a stronger move. I decided to sacrifice a tournament that was coming up in 1 week. I would refuse to play it, and my mother would certainly have to speak to me about this, because the sponsors and the Bonvoit associate would start calling her, asking, shouting, pleading to make me play again. And then the tournament came and went, and she did not come to me crying, why are you not playing chess? But I was crying inside because I learned that a boy whom I had easily defeated on 2 other occasions won. I realized my mother knew more tricks than I had and even thought of, but now I was tired of her game. I wanted to start practicing for the next tournament. She decided to pretend to let her win. I would be the one to speak first. So Waverly had to speak first, not Mom. So Mom won. I'm ready to play chess again, I announced to her. I imagined she would smile and then ask me with special things I wanted to eat. But instead, she gathered her face into a frown and stared into my eyes as if she could force some kind of truth out of me. Why do you not tell me this? Why do you tell me this? She said in a sharp tone. You think it's easy? One day quit, next day play. Everything for you is this way. So smart, so easy, so fast. I said I'd play. I whined. No, she shouted, and I almost jumped out of my skin jumped out of my scalp. It's not so easy anymore. No, she said, and I was quivering, stunned by what she said, and not knowing what she meant. And then I went back to my room. I stared at the chessboard, its 64 squares, to figure out how to undo this terrible mess I made. And after starting like this for many hours, I actually believed that I had made a white square black and the black square white. With everything, it would be all right. And sure enough, I won her back. That night, I developed a high fever, and she sat next to my bed, scolding me for going to school without my sweater. In the morning, she was there as well, feeding me rice porridge, flavored with chicken broth. She had strained herself. She said she was feeding me This because I had the chicken pox and one chicken knew how to fight another chicken. What a saying. One chicken knew how to fight the chicken pox. I like that. Oh, and, and in the afternoon, she sat in the chair in my room, knitting me a pink sweater, while telling me about a sweater that Auntie Schumann had knit for her daughter June, and how it was the most unattractive and the worst yarn ever used. I was so happy she had become her usual self. But after I got well, I discovered that really my mother had changed. She no longer hovered over me as I practiced different chess games. She did not polish my trophies every day. She did not cut out the small newspaper items and mentioned my name. It was as if she had erected an invisible wall. And I was secretly groping each day to see how high and how wide it was. At my next tournament, well, I had done well overall, and the end of the points were not enough. I lost. And what was worse, my mother said nothing. She seemed to walk around with this satisfied look as if it had happened because she had devised this strategy. I was horrified. I spent many hours every day going over in my mind what I had lost. I knew it was not just the last tournament. I examined every move, every piece, every square, and I could no longer see the secret weapons of the piece, the magic within the intersection of each square. I could see only mistakes, my weakness. It was though I had lost my magic armor. And everybody could see this, where it was easy to attack me. Over the next few weeks, and later in the months and the years, I continued to play, but never with that same feeling of supreme confidence. I fought hard with fear and desperation. When I won, I was grateful, relieved, and when I lost, I was filled with growing dread and then terror. That was no longer a prodigy anymore, that I had lost the gift and had turned into somewhat quite ordinary. When I lost twice to a boy whom I had defeated so easily in few years before, I stopped playing chess altogether. And nobody protested. I was 14 then. You know, I really don't understand, said Marlene, when I called her the night before. I had showed my mother the mink jacket. You can tell the IRS to piss you up the rope. But you can't stand up to your own mother? Sorry, that is funny. I always intended to. And then she'd say these little sneaky things, smoke bombs and little barps. And why don't you tell her to stop torturing you, said Marlene. Tell her to stop running your life. Tell her to shut up. That's hilarious, I said, with a half laugh. You want me to tell my mother to shut up? Sure, why not? Well, I don't know if it's explicitly stated in the law, but you can never tell a Chinese mother to shut up. You could be charged as an accessory to your own murder. I wasn't so much afraid of my mother as I was afraid for Rich. I already knew what she would do, how she would attack him, how she would criticize him. She would be quiet at first, then she would say a word about something small, something she had noticed, and then another word, and then another, and each time it flung out a little bit more. A piece of sand from one of the directions, another from behind, more and more, until his looks, his character, his soul would have eroded away. And even if I recognized her strategy, her sneak attack, I was afraid that some unseen speck or truth would fly into the eyes, and they would blur me. I was seeing and transforming him from the divine man I thought he was into someone quite mundane, nor morality wounded with tiresome habits and irritating imperfections. This happened to my first marriage to Marvin Chen, with whom I had eloped when I was 18 and he was 19. When I was in love with Marvin, he was nearly perfect. He graduated third in the class at Lowell and got a full scholarship to Stanford. He played tennis. He had bulging calf muscles and 146 straight black hairs on his chest. He made everyone laugh, and his own laugh was deep and sonorous, masculinity sexy. Chinese people don't have too much hair. So that's why he was making fun of himself, making it humorous to be accepted. He prided himself on having favorite love positions for different days and hours of the week. He had a whisper, was Wednesday afternoon, and I shivered. Wow. By the time my mother had her say about him, I saw his brain had shrunk from laziness so that now I was good only for thinking up excuses. He chased golf and tennis balls to run away from family responsibilities. His eyes wandered up and down other girls' legs so he didn't have to drive straight home anymore. He liked to tell big jokes to make other people feel little. He made a loud show of leaving $10 tip to strangers, but was stingy with his presents to family. He thought waxing his red sports car was all afternoon was more important than taking his wife somewhere. Nothing. My feelings for Marvin never reached the level of hate. No, it was worse in a way. I went from disappointment to contempt to apathetic boredom. I wasn't until after we separated on the nights when Shoshani was sleeping and I was lonely that I wondered if perhaps my mother had poisoned my marriage. Thank God her poison didn't after my daughter Shoshani. I almost aborted her though. When I found out I was pregnant, I was furious. I secretly referred to my pregnancy as my growing resentment, and I dragged Marvin down to the clinic so he would have to suffer through this, too. I turned out and went out to the wrong kind of clinic. They made us watch a film, a terrible bit of particulates brainwash. I saw those little thing babies were called them as a 7 weeks, and then the tiny, tiny fingers, and then she said the baby's translucent fingers could move, that we should imagine them clinging to the life of grasping for a chance, this miracle of life. They had shown anything else except tiny fingers. So thank God they did, because Shoshone really was a miracle. She was perfect. I found every detail about her to be remarkable, especially the way she flexed and curled her fingers from the very moment she flung her fist away from her mouth to cry. I knew my feelings for her were inviolable. But I worried for Rich because I knew my feelings for him were vulnerable to being felled by my mother's suspicions, passing remarks, and unnobious, and I was afraid at what would those be, because Rich Shields adored me in the same way I adored Shoshone. His love was unequalable. Nothing could change it. He expected nothing from me. My mere existence was enough. And at the same time, he said that he had changed for the better. He insisted he never was until he met me. And this confusion made this romantic gesture all the more ignoble. At working, for example, when he would staple FYI for your information notes to the legal briefs and corporate returns they had reviewed. He signed them at the bottom. FYI. FYI for you and I. The firm didn't know about our relationship, so that kind of recklessness behavior on his part thrilled me. The sexual chemistry that was really surprised me, though. I thought he'd been one of those quiet types who was awkwardly gentle and clumsy. The kind of mild-mannered guy who says, "Am I hurting you?" when I can't feel a thing, but he was attentive to every movement. I was sure he was reading my mind. He had no inhibitions, and wherever he discovered, whatever ones he discovered, I had to pry away from me like little treasures. He saw all these private aspects of me, and I mean not just sexual private parts, but my darker side, my meanness, my pettiness, my self-loathing, all the things I kept hidden, so that with him I was completely naked, and when I was feeling the most vulnerable, when the wrong word which would have sent me flying out the door, he always, and exactly at the right time, the right thing, the right moment, he didn't allow me to cover myself up. He would grab my hands, look at me straight in the eyes, and tell me something new about why he loved me. I never known love for sure, pure love. I was afraid that it would become sullied by my mother, so I tried to store everything one of these endowments about Rich in my memory, and I planned to call upon them again when the same time when it was necessary for me to feel good. After much thought, I came up with a brilliant plan. I concocted a way for Rich to meet my mother and win her over. In fact, I actually arranged it for my mother would want to cook a meal, especially for him. She's smart. I had some help from Auntie Shongon, and Auntie Shu was my mother's friend, whom way back they were very close, which meant they were ceaselessly tormenting each other with boasts and secrets. And I gave Auntie Shu a secret to boast about. Oh, what did she do? After walking through the North Beach one Sunday, I suggested to Rich that we stop by for a surprise visit to my Auntie Sue and Uncle Canning. They lived in the Leavenworth, just a few blocks west of my mother's apartment. It was late afternoon, just in time to catch Auntie Sue preparing Sunday's dinner. Stay, she said. I insist. No, it's just that we were walking by, and I said, already cooking enough for you. See, soup, 4 dishes. You don't eat it. Only have to throw it away, wasted. How could we refuse? 3 days later, Auntie Shush had a thank you letter from Rich and me. Rich said it was the best Chinese food he had ever tasted. And the next day, my mother called me to invite me to a belated birthday dinner for my father. For my brother, Vincent, was bringing his girlfriend, and Lisa Lum, I could bring a friend too. I knew she would do this because cooking was how my mother expressed her love, her pride, her power, her proof that she knew more than Auntie Sue. Just be sure to tell her later that her cooking was the best ever tasted, and it was far better than Auntie Sue, I told Rich. Believe me, it works. That night of the dinner, I sat in the kitchen watching her cook, waiting for the right moment to tell her about our marriage plans, that we would decide to get married next July, about 7 months away. She was chopping eggplant into wedges, chattering at the same time about Auntie Suem. She can only cook looking at a recipe. My instructions are in my fingers. I know the secret of ingredients to put it all and just using my nose. And she was slicing with such a forcity, seemingly inattentive to stop her sharp cleaver, that I was afraid her fingers would become one of the ingredients of the red cooked eggplant that shredded pork. I was hoping she would say something first about Rich. I had seen the expression when she opened the door, her forced smile as she scrunched him from head to toe, checking her every appraisal of him against that already given to her by Auntie Suzanne. I tried to anticipate what criticism she would have. Rich was not only Chinese, but he was a few years younger than I was. And unfortunately, he looked much younger with his curly red hair, smooth, pale skin, and the splash of orange freckles across his nose. He was a bit on the short side, capacity built, you know. In the dark business suit, and with the dark business suit, he looked nice, but easily forgettable. Like anybody's nephew at a funeral, which was why I didn't notice him the first year we worked together at the firm. But my mother noticed everything. So, what you think of Rich? I finally asked, holding my breath. Oh, she tossed the eggplant in the hot oil and made a loud, angry hissing sound. So many spots on his face, she said. I could feel the prickers on my back. They're freckles. Freckles are good luck, you know. I said, a bit too hearty in my trying to raise my voice above the din of the kitchen. Oh, she said inconceitedly. Yes, the more spots, the better. Everybody knows that. She considered the normal moment, then smiled and spoke in Chinese. Maybe this is true. When you were young, you got the chicken pox. So many spots. You had to stay home for 10 days. So lucky you, thought. I couldn't save Richard in the kitchen. I couldn't save him later at the dinner table. He had brought a bottle of French wine, something he didn't know my parents could not appreciate. My parents didn't even own wine glasses, and then he also made the mistake by drinking not one, but 2 frosted glasses full, while everybody else had a half-inch. Just the taste. When I offered Rich a fork, he insisted by using the slippery ivory chopsticks. He held them spryly like a knock-kneed legs of an ostrich, while picking up a large chunk of sauce-coated eggplant. Halfway between his plate and his open mouth, the chunk fell on the crisp white shirt and then slid into the crotch. It took several minutes to get Shoshone to stop shrieking with laughter. And then he helped himself to a big portion of shrimp and snow peas. Oh my gosh, he did the wrong thing. And not realizing he should have just taken only a little bit, a little tiny spoonful. It's not until everybody else had a morsel. He had declined the sautéed green beans, the tender and expensive leaves of bean plants plucked before the sprouts turned into beans. And Shoshone refused to eat them also, pointing to Rich. He didn't eat them. He didn't eat them at all. He thought he was being polite by refusing seconds when he should have followed my father's example. You made big show of talking small portions of seconds, thirds, and 4/4, always saying he could not resist another bite of something or other, and then groaning that he was so full he thought he would burst. But the worst was when Rich criticized my mother's cooking, and he didn't even know that he had done that. Oh my goodness. As it is the Chinese custom My mother always made this prayer guide remarks about her own cooking.